All right, well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the I Am Abel Foundation's Medicine Makers, where if your destination is a career in medicine, we're going to show you how to get there. Welcome to the show this evening. I am your host, Dr. Renee Roberts, board-certified family medicine physician, and I am super excited to welcome this evening's guest, the dynamic Dr. Carla Cork, who is also a board-certified family medicine physician, and she is also a licensed educator. We have a great show for you this evening. Dr. Cork is going to be speaking with us about dispelling some of the myths and the African American healthcare community, particularly with regards to dispelling myths about vaccination, blood donation, and organ donation. So welcome, Dr. Cork, to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here, Dr. Roberts. And we wanted to just start off quickly and talk about why we want you to come to the doctor. So with both of us being board certified family medicine physicians, it is highly important for you to come for the preventative care. Preventative care and preventative visits can prevent a lot of the things that cause people to go to the ER and then their families in an uprest for an emergent situation where areas in the health and the family and the health that they have not covered or discussed come up, and now they have to make a decision about someone's life. But today we wanted to talk about vaccines, blood donation, and becoming an organ donor. There are lots of myths in our community, and one of those is that vaccines are of no use and that physicians actually get money for promoting these vaccines. And we are both here to tell you that is false.
That is not the case.
That's not the case. So one of the reasons why we wanted to talk to you about vaccines is because every year we lose thousands of people, like in the tens of thousands, to flu. So the influenza comes every year, and the CDC and the NIH and the World Health Organization do their best in the infectious disease control to try to predict what strains will be the most virulent. But that is why we ask you all every year to go and get your vaccines. Neither one of us are making any money off these vaccines.
True.
Okay, so we want to make sure that you get that done. And we kind of talked, before, and I give examples where people will tell me, we have an immunocompromised patient, and they might be COPD, and they come in and they say, well, my neighbor got the vaccine, and they were sick.
And they got sick from the flu vaccine.
Right. Well, one of the things that we find out, like we just stated, was that thousands of people lose their lives every year, pediatric patients and geriatric patients or seniors, because they're immunocompromised or their immune system is weak and they have been unvaccinated. So that is one of the areas that we wanted to talk to you about.
Could you share with our audience real quick, what exactly do you mean by immunocompromised? Because I know we here in Dr. Land like to throw out lots of big words, but for our viewing audience who may not be too familiar with that, what is exactly meant by immunocompromised?
Right. So if, for example, you have a baby, all right, who is born, we'd know that the mother, unless she's breastfeeding, is not passing along that many coverage for the baby unless the baby goes to the doctor, to the pediatric visits, and gets its immunizations, okay? So some of them you get right away at the newborn visit. But if you are breastfeeding, then mother passes along some of the antibodies that she has formed to the baby. Okay, so that's very important because anything that the mother has been exposed to, then that will help the baby's system and their white blood cells kick in. So when we talk about being immunocompromised, I always ask people, remember your 6th grade or your 7th grade health class where we talked about the different types of blood cells. So you have your red blood cells and your white blood cells. And your white blood cells try to do a lot of protecting, but they do have to have a signal from the platelets also, okay? So you have your red blood cells and your platelets and your white blood cells. So your platelets are going to form the antibodies and your white blood cells are going to also form some antibodies. but your white blood cells will work for long-term memory. Okay, so that's why that becomes important. So examples of people who are immunocompromised are people who have HIV, people who have COPD, infants that are under, typically 6 months of age do not have a full body of protection unless, like I said, they have had some breastfeeding and been shared immunization from their mom. But typically, everyone needs to get the flu vaccine.
Okay, and for those of you that may be curious, COPD stands for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. Again, you are watching Medicine Makers here on Chicago's CAN TV, cable channel 21, AT&T channel 99, and we are streaming online live right now at www.cantv.org/hotline. Okay, remember this is a production of the I Am Abel Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization based here in Chicago, and we are geared towards pairing physician mentors with underrepresented minority students, high school, college, and post-baccalaureate students who aspire to be physicians. We are actually in the process of interviewing our upcoming class, and application deadline has been extended to March 4th. So if you are interested in applying, if you're a student, high school, college, or post-baccalaureate student, please feel free to do so. You can check us out on the I Am Abel website, which is www.iamabel.org, and Abel is spelled ABEL. Okay, well, you are in for a treat. We are talking with the lovely Dr. Carla Quirk, board-certified family medicine physician and licensed educator, and we are dispelling some myths this evening about vaccinations, organ donation, and blood donation. So I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about blood donations.
Yes.
This is a big one. I have a lot of my own patients that happen to donate blood and plasma, but then I have a lot that don't want to, even though there is definitely a need for that in the community. We always hear about a big hurricane or disaster, earthquake, and what's the first thing we hear on the TV?
Yes.
We need blood.
We need blood.
Why don't you share a little bit about the importance and need for blood donation?
I'd be happy to. So as African Americans, we are aware that we have a higher incidence of sickle cell anemia, and a lot of times those patients need blood. We have lots of other type of what we consider blood conditions where people need plasma. So as Dr. Roberts mentioned, there are people who will donate plasma and they donate whole blood. One of the first things that we would ask is to make sure that you know what your blood type is. There are certain types that are considered more rare than others, and there's one obviously that we know is a universal donor. So we always want to make sure that you know your blood type and that you are able to be of assistance to someone in a time of need. It could even be yourself. You might have an incident where you need to have blood as well. But again, like I stated, sickle cell anemia is usually one of the most common types of conditions that we have in our community, but there are other conditions where people need blood. So we don't want you to think that someone's going to try to take your blood and they're not going to take care of you. There are lots of things that we do prior to even making sure that you're a candidate. We have to make sure that your iron level is normal. We have to make sure that your hematocrit is normal. So these are like big words, but when we talked about that 6th grade and 7th grade anatomy, we talked about those different types of cells. The red blood cell has a special job. And so we check that red blood cell before we allow you to donate blood or plasma. And it doesn't mean that everyone will be able to do that. One of the biggest things that I would encourage you is to go hydrated. Do not skip meals. Do not go on an empty stomach, because all of those things could cause your numbers to be too low to donate, okay? We do have a limit to the amount they take. No, they are not going to take all of the blood out of your body. And it will help so many lives if you did that. And like I stated, there are different conditions, but you might even be the recipient of a blood transfusion one day. And
That's a very that's a very important point that Dr. Carla is making, is that you just never know what may happen. We could be one blown red light away from an automobile accident. You may have to have emergent surgery, have your appendix out, have your gallbladder out, and there could be a complication in surgery. And then all of a sudden, you're bleeding, and it's an emergency inside the surgery, and we are needing to give you blood products to bring your blood levels back up. So you just never know when you are going to be in a situation yourself, when you might need to donate blood. But it's a very important point that you bring up, because I do hear that quite a bit. People are afraid that they're going to go in there and turn into vampires and suck all of your blood out. So apparently that is not the case.
Yes. So that's not the case. So I hope that we have dispelled at least two of your myths. One for the vaccine. We are not getting wealthy off of that. It's solely for your health, which is the main reason why we both went into family medicine. And for being a blood donor, it's important for our entire community, and it could even be important for yourself or someone in your family if you already know what your blood type is, and if you are aware that you have donated and that there should be, you know, some blood available to save someone. So that's important.
I like that idea. Think about that. You might be the lifeblood, I guess pun intended in this case, but you actually might be the lifeline for one of your own family members. Maybe it's for your own child, maybe it's for an ailing parent or a sibling that is in need of blood products. You just might be the missing link. So definitely give that some consideration.
And I did want to just make one point about that. It's actually a good thing sometimes for people who maybe are adopted or they don't know a lot about their family history, and they go and they donate blood. And one of the things that we do, especially with the blood and the whole blood and the plasma, is we run special immunologic tests. So if we find something abnormal and we think that you might have a health condition, we are going to refer you to a blood specialist. So some of you may be familiar with the hematologist oncologist. So a lot of people think, oh, that's just a cancer doctor. But actually, they study disorders of the blood as well. And so as I stated previously, and we talked about sickle cell anemia, that's not a cancer, but it is a condition of the blood. And so sometimes people come in and they don't even know that they, have that, or that they're a carrier, or maybe even are unaware that they maybe have been exposed to some other type of infectious disease. So we cover all of that when you do your blood donation. Now, I'm pretty sure you're asking, well, I go to the doctor. I'm not one of those people who's afraid to go. And they draw my blood, and I've never heard any of this. They've never told me that I have an infectious disease. Well, you have to ask for some special testing to check for infectious disease. So just keep that in mind. Those are not standard tests unless you have like a pre-op for, we're getting you ready for an exam, for a special test, or for a special treatment or surgery.
That is an excellent point. I hear that quite a bit as well. Test me for everything. Okay, that is usually not the case, because testing you for everything does not make financial sense. In most cases, your insurance company probably would not like that, or if you don't have insurance, that's going to be a pretty hefty bill paying for that. But like Dr. Carla had mentioned, yes, most of the time when we do routine blood screening, it is for basic blood work, liver function, kidney function, a blood sugar, maybe a cholesterol as well. But specific testing for infectious disease is going to depend on, like you said, your symptoms, if you're presenting with an illness, or if you are actually seeking specific testing. So everyone, please remember, this is a live call-in show. If you have a question for the lovely Dr. Carla Cork, please get your questions ready. You can certainly call in. The number is at the bottom of your screen. It is area code 312, and the number is 738-1060. You are watching Medicine Makers on CAN TV. We're going to go ahead and continue our discussion now. This one that I think we hear a lot about. I'm super excited to talk about this. Organ donation. Should I become an organ donor? But if I become an organ donor, doesn't that mean that someone's going to hunt me down? If I end up in the hospital and they see that I'm an organ donor, they're not going to help me out because they're going to want me for my organs. Oh my goodness, help us out, Dr. Carla.
Perfect. perfect example of what we hear on a regular basis in our office. Again, we're both family medicine, so we're on the front line. People come to us first, and Dr. Roberts could not have described it better. I know I've heard this countless times. She's heard this countless times. Well, Doc, I'm just not an organ donor because, they're just going to let me die if they find out that I'm an organ donor. And that is not the case. That is absolutely false, and we do not want you to continue going on believing that myth. Currently, we know that potentially, if your loved one or yourself is an organ donor, you could help save up to 14 lives. There are so many organs. 14 that could be harvested.
Is fantastic.
Yes,
14 lives.
And so one of the things that we wanted to talk about was not only telling you, that no one's going to let you, expire or cause any harm to you. We want to let you know that there's a process to being an organ donor. And so just to quickly talk about that.
Yes, please do. Explain to us what the process is.
Right. So most of you will have a box on your license, and you can indicate that you're an organ donor. But if you get checked in an emergent situation, most of the time no one knows, no one knows that you're an organ donor. So we're going to take care of you. We're going to get you stable. And then we're going to move from there. Now, once you get to a floor or a unit and you're stabilized, if something goes adverse in your care and you are not able to sustain life on your own, and your family has maybe made the decision that they're going to let you go, then we will investigate further about whether or not you're an organ donor. Okay, so that's like the first level. So let's just say that you are an organ donor. We won't immediately just rush in and want to try to harvest these organs. You have to meet certain criteria. Okay, so let's say that you went in and you are like the best person with the most, the greatest intentions, and you want to be an organ donor. And you're like, just take everything, you love science, but maybe your condition when you came in, or your illness, or however the course of the progress, you are no longer able or eligible to donate certain organs. This usually comes in handy for patients and their families, because they want to know what type of service they can have, okay? Because obviously if we do take certain organs, there will be some scars in some places. Eyes may have to be closed if they decide to use the globe or the cornea or something like that. But I did want to let you know that even if you say, okay, yes, I do want my son, my daughter, my husband, my wife, or whoever the loved one is to be an organ donor, that the next step is there is actually a team that will come up and they do ask again. Okay, so they try to respect your wishes.
So it's a multi-step process.
Exactly.
Okay, lots of checks and balances in place.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you change your mind, obviously we would prefer that if there were some organs to be harvested that we could use, we do that. But if your family changes their mind, it's okay, and we will not proceed.
Okay. Well, I think you made some interesting points. One, that it does depend on the condition. It depends on the state, the health state of that person, because as Dr. Carla has mentioned, it might be a situation where all of the organs cannot be used because there might be a lot of extensive damage done to the kidneys or to the liver or to blood vessels or skin even. We can even graft skin to use that. But I would say this, though. I would not let that deter you, okay? Because maybe you do understand that for your fact that you do have some extensive medical conditions. Sure. I would say not to let that to deter you from becoming an organ donor, because you just never know. Again, like Dr. Carla had mentioned, we can save up to 14 lives, which is pretty spectacular. I'm actually an organ donor.
Yes, I am as well.
So as Dr. Carla had mentioned, that's a great time to actually make that designation when you go in for your driver's license renewal, but you certainly don't have to wait for that period of time either. There are definitely plenty of opportunities for you to go ahead and make that designation, but usually most people will do it around the time that they're getting their driver's license renewed. So, excellent.
That's
okay, well,
correct.
what other myths about organ donation
well,
do you encounter?
I would say probably aside from the biggest being someone thinks that we're not going to work as hard to save their life, or we're not going to save their life at all, would just be fear that, their family is not going to be able to have a proper service or ceremony for them. And like I stated, we definitely would work with them. We work with the family members to find out what their wishes are. Just know that, everything's not set in stone, and, we're not heartless, callous people. And we really, truly do want what's best for you and your family. But if you do have the opportunity to save another life, we would definitely encourage you to do so.
I would have to agree. I think what is very, very important, and what we would love for you to walk away from tonight from this show, particularly in the African American community, is that there is such a need for African American organ donors. Yes. I can't tell you how many patients I've seen. I'm pretty sure Dr. Carla as well. I have actually personal experiences with coworkers and friends who are in need of a kidney, in need of a liver, and they are on a transplant wait list for years at a time. That is no way to live your life, but unfortunately, that is the case for so many people. And again, it takes a lot to find a good organ match. Yes. It's not just as simple as saying, hey, here I am, here's my kidney or my portion of my liver. There's lots of different things that have to go into that to actually get a perfect match, and it's oftentimes easier if that match or that donor comes from someone of a similar
family.
ethnic or racial background, even with the family as well. So excellent information, Dr. Carla. Definitely something for all of us to spend some time talking about. Maybe it's time for you to sit down with your own family members at home and have a conversation. I think it's always a great thing. I know I had the conversation, with my parents to let them know, hey, heads up, hopefully nothing's going to happen to me, but if something does, I am an organ donor, and I want to be able to pass that gift of life on to someone else. So I know sometimes there can be a lot of taboos, things that we don't want to talk about, but I think it's a great time to sit down and actually have a conversation. Hey, what would happen if, and fill in the blank, and how would you feel, about me being an organ donor? Ultimately, the decision is yours, but I think it's also important too, especially if you have a spouse or significant other, children, dependents, let them know what your wishes are.
And so I just want to kind of piggyback off what Dr. Roberts is stating there. It's always better to have a plan before we have the emergency. Because if you don't want your second cousin, third removed, because that's the only person we could get in contact with, making decisions, then have the conversation, as Dr. Roberts has stated. Sit down, let's make some decisions, and let's have some hard discussions and some things that are taboo in the African American community. A lot of times we do not like to share our health history. We don't want anyone in our business. But these are your family members, these are your loved ones, and in the event that you are not able to speak for yourself, we would highly encourage you to have someone that you designate who could speak on your behalf that will carry out your wishes. So.
Absolutely. Please don't keep silent. I cannot, again, I know we both know, we've seen this happen. It's a very hard time to be having these conversations when someone is now unconscious, in a coma, not quite sure, what the outcome is going to be. That is definitely not the time to be striking up a conversation with your family members about, what your wishes are should something happen to you. And I do agree. It is something that happens a lot in the African American community. We like to keep silent about our health history, and it's hard because it makes our job harder too when we're taking family histories, because a lot of times we can kind of help guide your health care. If you had a grandma and great grandma and everyone had diabetes, and here you are, guess what? It's probably time that you get screened for diabetes as well, just in case that is continuing to run in your family. So I always say knowledge is power, okay?
Yes.
Speaking up is pivotal and crucial when it comes to going to the doctor. Go visit your doctor.
Yes,
By all
yes.
means. There are some fantastic doctors. That is what the I Am Able Foundation sets out to do, as well as we are raising our next generation of healthcare heroes.
Awesome.
So, Dr. Carla, any final thoughts?
Final thoughts would be go see your doctor. If you don't have a primary care, please establish care, because the first time that someone sees you, we don't want it to be because it was an emergency. If it was something that was preventable, by all means, find a family medicine physician and get in and move that paradigm, that pendulum back toward preventative care, so we don't have to spend any more money or any more time doing a lot for secondary, what we consider secondary and tertiary care. We want to get you ahead of time, ahead of the game, ahead of the ball. We want to find out what's wrong with you early on and lead you to a life of health.
Well, thank you so much. All right, this is Dr. Renee Roberts, and you have listened to the lovely Dr. Carla Quirk. You've been watching Medicine Makers. Real quick, how can they find you? If
Oh, wonderful. They can find me across all social media platforms. You can go to my website as well. That's DrCarlaCork.
Okay, well, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be back next Monday with another edition of Medicine Makers. You all have a wonderful evening.